Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here. I'm today with another edition of the Downward Spiral. This is the mini-series I am creating here on my channel, recounting my experiences watching The Promised Neverland Season 2 as it comes out weekly Saturday nights on Toonami at 1:30 a.m. This past or last night was episode 9, which means we have 2 more to go after this. So all I like to do is to give a brief synopsis of this episode and then kind of give my thoughts on it. So we begin where we ended up last time with the burning village, and Emma and Ray have approached Norman, and Norman has stopped trying to kill Villic, which we'll know his name later, and his granddaughter, which is totally named Emma. Now, at this point, Emma gives a speech to gives a speech to Norman, and Norman basically does a 180, decides he doesn't want to genocide the demons, and now he's just kind of on board with what Emma wants. So they go into the woods where the rest of his gang are basically hunting down the demons that escaped the city, and they find it difficult to kill them. And then Ray shows up and says, "Yeah, the operation's off. We're not going to do this now." And then like they agree ultimately that okay, we'll kind of do what you say, boss. And then they go into the temple, and they basically learn there that the two boys heard on the radio that the Grace Fieldhouse is planning shipping on the rest of the kids, including Phil and the others they left behind in season 1. Now they decide they have to plan on going to the Grace Fieldhouse again to save them. And what they learn is that the grandfather, the old man Villic, the old demon, shows up and explains to him how this one time 14, 15 years ago or so, he encountered, oh, sorry, give me a second, I have to cough here. He encountered a man who was dying, human, who gave him this little like piece of electronics, and he said, give this to the humans who are trying to escape, basically. And then he talks about, yeah, I ate him. And then he gives the piece to Emma, and it turns out it happens to be a pen cap that shows them the schematics of the Gracefield house, and conveniently also a cure for their ailments of the Lambda gang that they're slowly dying from. Which at this point, Norman has confessed to Emma that he is dying. And then they plan on, okay, we know what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to the Gracefield house, and we're gonna save everyone else. And then at the end, you see Vincent over the radio communicate with the Gracefield house, indicating that he may be betraying them. Ultimately, this episode is kind of like last week, in my opinion, where I'm just personally pretty mixed about it. And let me start with some of the things I liked. One point that was actually pretty unpopular in this episode was actually Vincent betraying everyone. That twist at the end. I actually kind of liked it because it's like the first moment this whole season that reminded me actually of season 1. Season 1 was really built on this whole air of suspense, and you had this availability of like people might betray each other, you know. Like for example, a twist I really liked was at the end of, I think it was episode 3 or 4 of the first season, you had Norman set out this plan to determine who was the traitor in the house that was feeding information to Isabella. At this point, he had been convinced that the traitor is either Dawn or Gilda. So then he basically tells him, hey, I got this rope. I got this rope, and it will rope to go over the wall, and basically explains the plot to him. It's like, okay. And he tells them different locations, and which location that rope gets reported from is the one that's a traitor. But what he also did was that he set up a third rope and only told Ray about it, and that was the rope that was missing, confirming that Ray was the person betraying them. And the episode ends with saying, "So when we're going to tell us that you're our traitor?" And then what I liked about it was the next episode they kind of had Ray be like, "Well, I kind of knew about everything the whole time, and I'm planning my way out, so I'm actually on your side." That's what I'm expecting with this episode too, because, by the way, this does not happen in the manga. That's a very common phrase I'm going to be saying in this whole episode, I can tell you right now. And Vincent was kind of portrayed as being this, like, really loyal guy in the manga. And this could work either as, like, A, he's trading them for, obviously, probably the cure for the Lambda drugs to save his life, or this could be a trap that he and everyone else kind of okayed. So, at this end of this episode, so then I like that. Okay, now let me go into some of the things I hated. I mentioned before how Deus Ex Machina has been all over the season, and man, it was the main feature of this episode. Deus Ex Machina is basically a fancy way for saying the plot happened to have something happen that really bailed out the characters. Like, for example, back in like episode 5 or whatever, when G.I. Joe basically invaded William Minerva, or sorry, James Rattry's compound, you had you had them round up all the kids, and when all hope looks lost, a freaking wood crawler comes out from the forest and eats G.I. Joe. Where 99 out of 100, those kids are fucked. But no. This one time, this one thing that would rarely happen happens to happen and save everyone. Like stuff like that. For example, you had this whole thing, especially with the pin cap. This old man, this specific demon, who already, by circumstance, happens to already know who Mujika was, that already has her blood, so he would be immune from the drug, was able to, oh yeah, this one time I happened to be in the woods at this right moment about 15 years ago, where this guy gave me this piece of technology that I conveniently remembered and conveniently have on my person that would happen to be the exact thing you need in this exact circumstance, that happen to have the schematics of the Gray's Field House and the the antidote to the drug where it is, that beforehand, if you came in like an episode earlier, this would have been worthless to us. But no, you came in at this exact time, and you happen to already have this Deus Ex Machina moment by snapping Norman out of it, by your granddaughter happening to have the same name as Emma, which happened to help bail out the other kids earlier by him saying, "Oh, Emma, that's a nice name," thinking he's talking about his granddaughter and not this random human girl he's never met before. Again, and you can see what I'm going on with this. And it's lazy writing. That's the ultimate lazy writing, because that's the writing you have when the author, of course, with anime, the mangaka, wrote himself into a corner, figured out I need to do something to further the plot and to help out the characters, and he pulls something randomly out of his ass that just so happens to be the exact thing that's needed at that point. Like the ultimate use of this is Yu-Gi-Oh, where usually when the main character is in a duel against whatever villain in the episode it is, he's about to lose. But there's like exactly one card in this deck that if I happen to draw it, I will win this duel. And every single time, he happens to always draw this one card, and he always happens to win, you know? And that's what it feels like in this episode, you know? And that's just so convenient, especially the whole like, okay, you could be like, okay, maybe someone, of course, since you could argue, well, since it was kind of already known to the resistance that the only way out to the human realm was through the Grace Field House, where the one remaining portal was. So it'd be nice to have the schematics of the place. But no, also knowing, oh, this like project that we don't even know exists yet? How about we have an antidote to a random drug that they happen to be creating that totally won't be useful in a very specific circumstance 15 years later? And we don't even know much about Project Lambda of that regards. And we know in this episode, also kind of a scene I forgot, I kind of glossed over, was a scene where I guess the main villain of the show now, was talking to Isabella and talking to some of the main head demons, saying, "Oh, by the way, we're thinking about getting rid of the farm system and just kind of force feeding a bunch of kids all these drugs to make their brains stronger, make them smarter, so they would be more yummy to the demons, basically, in a nutshell." And that has its own share of problems. But at the same time, honestly, of all the dumb stuff that's happened this season, that's among the least dumb stuff. And also, you had and that's another thing that was weird about this episode. Like, okay, like 4 or 5 episodes ago, when you first introduced Isabella this season, you had her being in prison, basically saying the only reason why we haven't killed you yet is because we think you would be the key to getting these kids back. So they tell them, "Oh, we'll let you live if you get these kids back." Basically, she's a granny in this episode, which is basically like the highest rank for a female human in this universe. So like she went from being like an absolute loser, worst, like committing like one of the worst acts ever by not keeping control of these kids. And instead of killing her, they just give her a promotion, Where's the other granny, by the way? The main granny we saw in this season when talking and bragging to Isabella, and also the woman that confronted and had Sister Crone killed in the first season. What happened to her? Is she like dead now? Is there multiple grannies? And it just seemed random to me. And also, it was like this was what Isabella's plan was the whole time. Like they showed her to be an insanely intelligent woman in the first season as well, but here it's just like, oh, we happen to notice they stole a radio, so we think they're listening to the radio. Let's say absolute bait on the radio and get them to come here, which honestly is a smart plan. It's not like the type of plan you spend 5 episodes like kind of leaving in the dark, having like kind of rubbing your hands together, like, oh, I got a good idea for something this simple. But at the same time, it's like the one way to defeat your enemy is to put them in a very predictable location at a very predictable time, and that's exactly it. Because she knows Emma, and that's one thing about the first season was that Isabella basically was Emma if Emma chose the route of becoming a mother instead of escape. That's basically what Emma is to her. So, and here it's just like kind of this whole I know my kids, I love my kids, putting air quotes around love and I want to see them again, which is its own thing, which honestly I kind of liked. But at the same time, to hype up a plan for 5 episodes to be like, oh, we're just gonna say something over the radio and they'll come here, really does not seem like worth the hype in a way. And also, okay, kind of go back to the manga explains it better thing. A lot of people got pissed off initially with this pen cap because that was a very key part of the Goldie Pond arc. And you wonder how Villic, the old demon man, was like, "Oh, I saw a guy in the woods that was dying." Well, if in the manga there's certain characters this could be like. I think we're led to believe in the anime this is supposed to be William Minerva slash James Attree, but in the manga this is implied to be a character named Yugo, which was another one of the Lambda Project kids who we never get to see because we're running through everything. And there's another kid, I believe in the Goldie Pond arc named Lucas, this could be, who, again, if you're only watching the anime, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But people in the manga, you're like nodding along, like, yes, this is BS, this is stupid. And also, like I mentioned earlier, the whole Vincent going over the radio with Grace Fieldhouse doesn't happen either. And at this point, it just feels like, and what I'm worried about is there's this thing I've heard about called Americanization. And you might be like, well, that's like when 4 Kids changes rice balls to jelly donuts, right? Well, no. Americanization is the stereotype in media where American media tries to be optimistic. Like they'll try to fit in a happy ending where there really shouldn't be one. I'm worried that's happening here to The Promised Neverland. I'm not going to tell you how the Promised Neverland manga ends, but I have a weird feeling they're going to make this into the most Disney esque ending ever. We got warning signs already. There's multiple scenes and opportunities that should have been like guns and stuff. And the only guns we saw were like the ones G.I. Joe was holding. For example, if I recall correctly, William Minerva's compound had weapons to be like, hey, you might come under fire. These are going to be useful. And also the Goldie Pond arc. Multiple people use guns in that arc, but again, you don't get to see that shit. So, and that I thought was the first warning sign of, oh, they're gonna make this as saccharine, as inoffensive as possible. Like, and they kind of went edgelord last episode, which I was surprised by and pleasantly surprised by the way. As I mentioned, with showing demons transforming, demons getting killed, and at the same time, I mean, I thought that was us turning a corner into a good direction where it's like, okay, this was been a disappointing season, but there's some good stuff about it. And this episode wasn't the worst episode. I saw some people online like, this is the worst episode of anime I've ever seen. No, I don't think this is as like Tokyo Ghoul season 2 bad yet. But at the same time, this is a disappointment to season 1 overall. How to rate this episode, I'd give this like I'll say a 5.5 out of 10. It's not the best, not the worst. A small step down from last episode, which I thought was surprisingly decent. This one was just kind of bad. And again, you had this thing also. One more thing I forgot to mention. Almost ended it. This episode really wanted you to know that Emma is in the right. And they do so when you want to show characters in the right, you show something that proves they're in the right. You don't kind of force it. Like here you have Emma talking to Norman, who's hardened against the demons. Norman and Project Lambda kids have been tortured for years by the demons. They got out and they've been planning for a long time about how to exterminate the demons. And one 13-year-old girl's speech kind of stops that. No, and I know Norman. You can argue, well, Norman's in love with Emma, or Norman like has a deep feelings for Emma. He cares about her and he trusts her. At the same time, if you've been planning on this for years, if your mindset has been changed by being tortured for years, and he literally said, like last episode, I will be your god, I will be your devil. He was saying real edgelord shit. But no, this girl says basically we all need to be friends for like 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden you're on board. This makes no fucking sense. And then you have like the Project Lambda kids, same story, including Barbara, who is full on wanting to do this. Magically, she can't bring herself to do it. And we've seen enough of her personality to know she's totally the person that would just kill a 4-year-old girl. Probably do it in front of her mother too. But no, all of a sudden she can't do this. And then Vincent and Sizzlo are like, and even like Zoza, what the hell that guy's name? The guy that grunts, the guy who's like the show's version of Groot, except for Groot's actually likable. Who are like they just like accept it. And some people are like, well, this whole thing, like Vincent is like, he's like, well, he's pissed off with Norman, so this is a way of getting back at him. Yeah, you hate the demons. Why are you gonna make a deal with the demons? This makes no sense. That's why I'm still leaning on this is some type of plot back to like get the demons, trap the demons somehow. I have faith in that. And I'm expecting that too. It would be really horrible writing, be like, oh, he decided to join forces with the demons because Norman pissed him off one time. This guy they've been following to the ends of the earth. That literally, like, when Norman saved them, Barbara was like, are you a god? Like, she probably seen him before, but like, are you my god? Are you my savior here? And I went on the last episode about the concept of Christ figures and how Norman is a very poorly written Christ figure. And this episode really furthers that too. And you have Mujika literally giving people her blood at this point. Like, you have a much better Christ figure. And I have a feeling they're just going to abandon her character at this point. Like, this is a character that can be very useful because of her blood and her ability to make the demons not need to eat humans. I have a feeling they're just going to abandon that plot line. They're going to abandon her as a character. And she's probably turned into my favorite character this season, by the way. Emma's been kind of a whiny mess, and like she has good moments in the manga, by the way. In the Goldie Pond arc and in like the Seven Walls, not really arc, but the Seven Walls part of the manga where she really shines and she basically bails out the team. But with those cut out, she just comes off like whiny and right, even though we haven't seen why she's right. And Ray has gone during this season from being like, okay, this is a smart guy who's like the more level-headed one to kind of just a prop. I think he appeared in like virtually every scene this episode, but only said like two things, you know. And also, Norman is still kind of like this edgelord character, though he's like repentant and like, holy crap! Like, I still can't believe how easy it was for Emma to convince him by saying, "You're like a crying child," and Norman's like, "Bitch, I'm 14 and I have a dagger. Don't talk shit," you know. And honestly, geez, the more I talk about, it, the more angry I'm actually getting. You can tell. I'm still gonna give this a 5.5 out of 10, by the way. And again, it's just the characters have been bad this season. Don and Gilda more or less do nothing now. They're kind of written out. None of the other little kids do anything, and that's for good reason. I kind of hated those kids anyway, you know. The old guy, the freaking old demon guy, is probably the second best character of the season. He's appeared like in like 5 minutes of screen time, by the way. He's like second best character. He's barely appeared and talked about eating a guy at one point. Did not elaborate and walked out like Chad. And like my favorite character is Mujika, who really is a really well written character if they're playing the Christ figure role, but again, she doesn't get that much screen time, so we don't get to develop her in this role as well, you know. And again, what do you guys think about this episode? I thought this was bad, but not horrendous. What do you guys think? If you like this content for more wacky downward spiral Tanami content like this, please like, comment, subscribe. I'm the Super Orange Cat, and that is all.